Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Peas. I just drew myself a bath. I just came out here from the bath, got my robe on. Has anyone seen Nicholas? I think. Nick? Is he in the bathroom? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Two Peas on a podcast. And right across the way is the salt to my burn, Nicholas. How are you? There's a castle behind you.
Yeah, that's right. Glasses guy here reporting live from the Saltburn estate. Gerald, can you hear me? Gerald, are you there?
Oh God, I think I'm gonna die. I didn't expect that.
Gerald, you're breaking up. It sounds like you're wheezing and dying like an old man. Can you hear me?
I could hear you. I did not expect the reporter to come in. That was great. That was good.
Okay, we're live here. Things are really tense and moody here right now, and it feels like things are getting ready to pop off literally any second.
I'll say. Everyone is about to lose their minds. I think that's what it says on the poster for Saltburn. That's what we're covering this week, folks. The new Emerald Fennell movie. First movie was Promising Young Woman in 2020, I think.
Think so.
And she's back with her sophomore effort, which we will be covering tonight. I've been very excited to talk about this movie. I actually didn't know we were doing this on the show, Nick. I didn't think we were going to be able to squeeze it in with all the end of the year stuff that we have going on, and you were afraid it might not be playing near you, and here we are. So I'm thrilled that I get to finally discuss this movie on the mic.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we like to roll a segment. There's a little caveat, but we like to roll a segment that we call One Big Question.
You gotta ask yourself a question.
I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
How dare us?
I almost played the wrong
segment.
sound drop for that.
So one big question, we usually pitch a question at each other. We thought it would be fun to kind of switch it up a little bit because we get a lot of great questions in the fan feedback every week from our listeners. And we obviously can't answer all of them. So we said, why don't we let them kind of come up with the one big question? And we kind of talk beforehand of a question that we want to discuss at the top of the episode. So, Nick, why don't you read to the folks what question and whose question it was that we decided to talk about here for a couple minutes?
We decided to switch it up as podcaster speak for we couldn't think of one big questions for ourselves. We got Julio, our brother from the Contrarians. We love you, Julio. We talked about answering his question, is this the Flash of Oscar hopefuls? But I think, Gerald, instead we pivoted to how many movies do you give a filmmaker before you decide you're a ride or die follower of theirs? Because this is Emerald Fennell's sophomore effort. Of course, as you mentioned, Promising Young Woman, which I really loved. I really loved that movie. So I was looking forward to this one a lot. And I know you were a big fan of Promising Young Woman as well.
Yep. It was my favorite movie of that year. And to answer Julio's question, I think it really only takes, there's kind of two answers, but it could very easily be one film for me personally. Like, I get very loyal to filmmakers that I just kind of follow their whole career. And I know we talked about Alexander Payne last week, and I feel like you're like that with him. And, you thought Downsizing was a dud, but you still love the guy, and he's back in your good graces with The Holdovers. So you're going to find out what I thought about Saltburn. But even if I hated Saltburn, I love Emerald Fennell as a filmmaker. I think she's fearless. I am a ride or die of hers, as he put it in the question there, Julio. I absolutely will be seated any movie or TV show or anything that she does because of the way that she shoots films and the colors and the music. She has such great sound drops and use of music, and so far the two movies that she's done have really spoken to me too from like a time period perspective, because Saltburn was 2006. I remember that like it was yesterday, and she just really captures a lot of things that are close to my psyche. Do you know what I mean? So I would say one movie is enough. What about you, Nick?
Tingling those nostalgia berry for the aughts. Is that what it was?
Yeah, that was it.
I think that's what it was called. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you 100%. It's one. It's literally one. Like, if it's a good enough film, you're going to immediately be kind of attracted to the style that director has. and you're going to want to keep going back for more and more and more. I mean, think of like Nolan, think of like a Tarantino, think of like Tim Burton. Even Tim Burton's got a really, really unique kind of style. Kind of stick to the point of Saltburn here for Emerald Fennell. All the things you mentioned are, I think, whether you love or hate Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, I don't think you could say that either film is necessarily made badly. At least I would argue that you can't, because I think both of them are made like really, really well in certain aspects. Obviously, we'll talk a lot about Saltburn when we get to it, but it's one, and then, like, you know, you have to be a filmmaker who makes. You have to churn out like just dud after dud after dud for me to eventually just be like, nope, wash my hands of you, throw my hands up and walk away. Like, you know, I think the Countdown Boys refer to it as De Palma-ing, you know, where De Palma, sure. De Palma had fallen from grace, well, you know, a very, very long time ago. I would say, I would say one. I would definitely agree.
I mean, we're eye to eye there, but, you know, even I think of a filmmaker like Cameron Crowe, even, who in the 90s and early to mid 2000s was just banger after banger, just a greatest hits compilation like no other. And then he kind of started to kind of fall off a little bit, but to your point, I would still show up for him because of how connected to his films I was in the first like 10 years of his career. And he did a couple duds that I saw that I hated, like We Bought a Zoo, and like, I mean, Elizabethtown was okay. Like, I liked parts of it, but I mean, as a film, it was definitely not on par with a lot of his other stuff. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if he put a movie out next year, I'd be there, you know, just because I think if you get on with these filmmakers, or even if we're as an extension, if you're talking about actors, if you get on with them, like at the beginning of their careers, kind of, and you kind of grow with their success too, like you mentioned Tarantino, which was peak movie lover time for me, mid 90s. I mean, it was when I was becoming a cinephile. So I kind of grew up with Quentin having his success. So I don't care what he makes, I'm going to go. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going to probably love it. I mean, I love everything the guy does. So I would say one as well is plenty for me to be a ride or die. Julio, thank you for the question. We're going to be mixing it up a little bit. I'll still be asking for feedback every week, but then Nick and I will kind of get together before the episode, and we will handpick a question to talk about at the top of the review. Speaking of the review, Nick.
Uh-oh.
Emerald Fennell's sophomore film, Saltburn, is one that we're discussing tonight. And now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the review, we always give our score up top out of 10 without discussing it with each other in what we call the early score reveal.
Damn it, this always happens. I think I'm going to score, and then I never score. It's not fair.
Is that the right sound drop? You didn't play that. I feel like you played that before.
Wow. You know what? Listen.
Hey, I'm mystified by the landscape where you're recording this episode. I can't believe you were able to get in there. Their security is pretty tight, so I'm proud. Listen,
I'm just like this place is so bougie. Like, I know it sounds like I'm in a studio right now. I know it seems like I'm indoors in an echoey office, but really they've built this nice little soundproof booth outside in front of this little, you know, man-made pond in front of this beautiful castle here. Oh, no, wait. Oh, that guy's got blood on his mouth. Well, I'll ask about that later. I'll find out what happened about that later.
Yeah, find out about that. We'll have to discuss when you get the info on that one. All right, man, you ready? I'm going to count you in here. Our scores out of 10. We have not discussed it with each other. Out of 10 for Saltburn. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Wow.
Oh. Dude.
He's dragging down the average again, baby. That's a 5.
All right, hold on. 9 from me and a 5 from Nick. So
Glasses
9 out of 10.
Guys voting a 5 from Saltburn. Live from Saltburn, voting a 5 on Saltburn. There you go. Read it and read, Saltburners.
So that's a 7 out of 10 from the P's, which maybe I should have given it a 10 to boost it up a little bit even higher.
Boost it up a little bit. Yeah, all right.
A cumulative score of 7 out of 10 on Saltburn, 9 from me, 5 from Nick. You want to go first? You want me to go first? What do you want to do here?
You know what? What I'm most curious about, and I had a feeling you were going to rate this much, much higher than me. I've got a lot of good things to say about this movie. My score, I'm going to say this from the outset. I think my score is honestly, like, for as many things as I enjoyed about the film, my score is going to seem low. we'll talk more about why that necessarily is as we get a little bit further into it. But you gave it a 9 out of 10, man. So I want to hear the love fest out of you. Like, let's wait to get into the other stuff later.
Okay, no problem. The only thing, and I'm not even kidding, the only thing that did not work for me for this entire, the runtime is
just a shade over 2 hours.
Yeah,
like
131 minutes. We talked about it earlier. So a little over 2 hours. The only part of this movie that I didn't like or that didn't work for me is a little montage thing at the end that we'll talk about when we get to the spoiler discussion. By the way, this is spoiler free for a few minutes, anybody that has not seen it, but we will let you know when we get into spoilers because there's heavy spoilers for specific scenes and stuff.
You can't really talk about anything with this movie without spoiling it.
Yeah, so generally, that was the only thing. The rest of this movie, man, and I know, film's subjective and that kind of thing. I'm a sicko, dude. Like, this is my cup of tea, bro. Like, filmmakers like, most recently, like Yorgos Lanthimos and, Killing of the Sacred Deer and The Lobster and, even further back to films like David Lynch as a filmmaker. I see hints of those types of, filmmaking techniques on display here with Saltburn. And I think Promising Young Woman is a better movie for me. In terms of like an enjoyment level. But I think Saltburn is a better made movie. I think it's a more well-made movie. She really, really upped her game from the director's chair. And the cinematography, we already talked about the music and the score, the way she kind of shoots this film in a very constricted, I think it was like a 1:331 or something ratio, like a really crazy ratio that I saw an interview with her that she did intentionally to kind of put the viewer in this grandiose, she wanted to be able to see the high ceilings and wanted everything to be kind of stretched vertically as opposed to horizontally, which is what we're used to with the widescreen format.
Mm-hmm.
And just all these choices that were made, and to set it in 2006 so that it was pre-social media. It was, I saw something funny where she said she really wanted to do it so they could smoke in public because it was like right before they banned smoking everywhere. And there's a lot of really quote unquote cool smoking in this movie, especially from like Jacob Elordi's character. So I get it. I get why, and I'm not saying that you hated it, but I get why people hate it or didn't get it or whatever. It's a lot to take in, and it's a lot thematically, and it's kind of scattered in that way, but visually and everything from the top down, technical wise, to the performances, and obviously I'm talking about the direction already, just worked for me, man. Like, it was like the phrase "a kid in a candy store" for me. I mean, this is exactly what Gerald wants when he goes to the movies, is this weird bubblegum visual, like confetti just being sprayed all over me. Where are you at with your 5, man? What do you think generally before we get into the spoilers?
I mean, I think for given the score, I love the performances in this film. I think by and large they're really, really good performances. I really, really love the production design, the way the film was shot. Again, the 4:3 ratio. I mean, this setting, look at it. It's gorgeous. The cinematography and set design and everything in this film, it is impeccable. It's unbelievable. It's really, really, really well made. I think the problem why this movie gets a 5 for me, is this just did not connect to me whatsoever. During watching this movie, I kind of kept sitting there waiting for something to happen, because it was obvious, like there was just this tension hanging over the movie, which I mean, like that's to Emerald Fennell's credit. That's, you want to, in a movie like this, you want an atmosphere of tension kind of hanging over it a little bit. But I mean, I'm kind of just waiting for something to happen the whole time. And for everybody else, I don't know how you felt about it the first time you saw it or whatever. You'll have to ring in on it. But I was waiting for everybody else to find Oliver as weirdly creepy as I did, and wondered why anyone would want to hang out with him or want him around. And then, like, as events start to happen, at the school and at Saltburn and everything, well, we'll get there in spoilers. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie that we really need to talk about. But like, I kind of kept sitting there waiting to be like, just nobody else see this? Is nobody else going to mention this? Is nobody else going to say anything about this at all?
Well, that's interesting, and I'll chime in right before we rip down the spoilers and just touch on that real quick because that's an interesting take, and I've actually heard that take from other people that I've listened to interviews and reviews and stuff. But I, Barry Keoghan, who plays Oliver, who's the lead character, I did not find him creepy until it's kind of revealed to us. I thought he was kind of this shy, charming, unlucky soul who wanted to fit in, and a lot of that at least worked for me from his performance. Let's go ahead and peel back the spoilers, guys. So going forward, anything that we say about Saltburn will spoil certain scenes, characters, whatever plot twist for you.
I'm going to reiterate this. We don't normally reiterate this for the spoiler wall, but if you're planning on seeing this movie, go see it before you listen to this portion of the review, because there's so much that happens, and I feel like it's better probably. I mean, that's true for most films, I would say, but in this kind of a film especially, because you definitely don't want to know anything going into this. G told me that last week, not to like literally watch or look at anything for it, and I didn't. Right. I knew only that it was an Emerald Fennell film, and I had seen like the picture of Oliver's character like on the balcony in the bathrobe. That one kind of like it's like the most. I think it's like the most like the most marketed shot that I've like seen from the movie hanging out there.
Yeah,
if you're planning on seeing this movie,
stuff,
please, just come back to this portion at the end, bookmark it in your podcatcher, and then come back and listen to us blather on about it after that.
Now, I'm gonna use this as a jumping off point, Nick, and then I want you to kind of build on what I'm about to say here. But the plot beats of the movie aside, I think what is so fascinating about a movie like Saltburn, and about Saltburn specifically, is how it elicits conversation and how it has it. I love movies that are down the middle. Like, I'm just going to tell you right now, like probably some of my favorite movies to like talk about are movies that are probably sitting around 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'll just tell you right now.
That are divisive.
Last year, yeah. Last year, one of my favorite movies, I think it was like my number 2 of the year last year, was Babylon, the Damien Chazelle film that's like 3 hours that half the world hated and half the world loved. I was on the side that loved it. I don't know if you saw that one or not.
Nope.
But this is this year's Babylon to me, because I just love that it just, whether you hate it or love it, you're kind of scratching your head and you're kind of pondering what Fennell was trying to get across, or was she trying to get anything across? I mean, we're spoiler here, man, so say whatever you want to say, but do you get what I'm saying there? Like, do you think she had a message for this movie, or do you think this movie was shock with little substance?
I don't think it was. Well, I don't think it doesn't have substance, and I also don't think. I mean, it just kind of is what it is. If you take a message from it, you do. If you don't, you don't. I don't necessarily think that there's an intended message here. At least maybe if there was, it didn't hit me in the head hard enough. But I don't think that necessarily matters either, whether or not a movie is intended to have a message or whatever. I think substance is all kind of within the eye of the beholder. Anyway, it's like all within the eye of the consumer. Like once you consume a thing or whatever, I think, for whatever we're going to say about this movie from here going forward, I think that this is definitely the film that Emerald Fennell wanted to make, and I think achieved that. To whatever end, I think achieved exactly what she was going for to that end. And to me, like, even though like I'm going to rate this movie lower, is a great achievement. Like, I mean, this wasn't meant to play to a wide audience. This wasn't meant to play to, general audiences who want everything wrapped up in a neat little bow. Although there's a scene like that we'll talk about.
I know.
There's a lot of those kind of different things. Where I really feel like this was just made for people who just want something to kind of like immerse themselves into and just get kind of twisted up by. It twisted up in a good way, twisted up in a bad way, or whatever, whether that be mentally, emotionally, whatever. I think this movie's meant to, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think this movie's meant to invoke a reaction out of you, whether that's positive or negative, whether that be anger, whether that be happiness, whether that be insane creepiness. I can't believe you didn't think that Oliver was creepy, man. Literally, like, hair on the back of my neck, like bristling, like
at Oxford.
super skeevy, creepy dude. I mean, he started out like there was a brief period, and I'm talking like the first maybe 10 minutes of the movie, where I was like, oh, he's really meek and quiet and like all these different things and wants to be in with like the whole things. Like, dude, from the second, there's a scene that happens in the movie where Felix is like the dreamboat, like handsome, attractive, funny, like literally he's like God's gift to everybody. I want to be him, everybody wants to be him, like literally that kind of a character, that kind of a person. Like his mojo with him kind of runs out. Like he befriends him by giving him the bike, because his bike like had a flat tire and whatever. Like he befriends him and ingratiates himself like into their group by doing that, but then like he runs out of capital there. And so then like the whole thing about the dad comes up, about like he gets that phone call that like his dad dies and everything. That to me, like all that to me felt off. Like it felt disingenuous to me, and I'm just like,
it didn't for me though.
Like it really seemed to me like it felt like to me, I'm like, this guy's concocting this stuff. I didn't know to what degree. Like I'm not saying like I called it all out ahead of time, because I definitely didn't. But what I'm saying is it gave me an off vibe. I was like, nah, something's not right about this. Like he's definitely doing this because Felix starts to like kind of ignore him and is like, okay, yeah, like, well, we hung out, but like we're not friends or anything. Like we don't need to hang out or anything. And then all of a sudden Oliver concocts this way to get Felix like sympathy, to get his sympathy.
At the same time, though, at Oxford, when he comes to Felix's room or dorm room or whatever and tells him about his dad and he's breaking down, and I didn't like, in other words, we don't see him hatching a plan to do that. So this is a perfect thing for what I'm about to say, but I feel like if you believed what the character was, because I'll just tell you, and I know we're into spoilers, but until they went to Oliver's parents' house in the one scene towards the end of the film, I did not know that any of that was fabricated. I did begin to think that Oliver was more insidious than I had thought the first half of the film, when he gets to Saltburn and does some things. And we have the scene with the sister, Venetia, played by Allison Oliver, who's a newcomer who I thought did awesome in this.
Phenomenal. She's great.
For this to be her first feature role.
She's really, really great. Cast top to bottom in this is, I think, great. I think the cast top to bottom in this is fantastic.
And Oliver says in that scene with her that he's a vampire, and he mentions that, and obviously does some crazy shit, going forward for the rest of the film, kind of starting with that scene with her.
Gets his Red Wings voice.
Yeah, he does. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think I was more connected to what was happening, and I was more invested in his character until I started kind of learning the different things that were unsavory, which we don't find out really till after that scene with Venetia, really. And then it kind of starts to become like, oh shit, this guy's doing some shit that I don't understand why anybody would do this in real life. Yeah. There's three major shock scenes in this movie that I want to touch on real quick, because I want to make sure we talk about all three of them before we run out of time. And I asked you let me lead with this. You said that you kept waiting for something to happen in this movie, generally speaking. You said that in your open. And I kind of asked you if you thought the movie had a message. So we're going to talk about those three scenes. Don't let me forget. But before we lead into them, what is Saltburn about for you? Like, do you think this movie is about anything? Like, in other words, if you were explaining this to somebody without spoiling it, what is this movie? What is she saying, man? Because that's what's fascinating to me. Because I feel like, and the reason I'm asking is I feel like she's too smart of a filmmaker to just put a bunch of images on screen. Like, I feel like she definitely had something in mind, like a story that she wanted to kind of tell us. Do you get what I'm saying? And I don't know. Now, I think the movie is about desire and love and wanting to be loved. You know?
That's one.
Go ahead.
It's also obsession. Throw a big dose of obsession in there.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, kind of like, you know, throw in like a whole bunch of extra like sexual deviancy and, you know, whatever else you really want to throw in there. I mean, what does the movie mean necessarily? I mean, I think
I
that
know, it's crazy.
I think that it's a psychological thriller-ish. I guess it's not probably like a thriller by the most like strict definition or anything like that, but like
No.
it has an atmosphere to it, and I don't know if I know how to describe it properly. Words are going to fail me here, but it has an atmosphere about it wherein I was waiting the whole time. I was just waiting for something to happen. Now, you're talking about the shock scenes. The shock scenes aren't what I'm referring to in that kind of case. I'm waiting for like the big plot spin, the big something that's going to happen as part of this plot that's going to be like, oh snap, things just got lit up. I was just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting the whole time. Like, I felt so off about Oliver. I'm like, there's something about this character that's just not sitting right. Like, because here's the thing, and to Barry Keoghan's credit, he does a phenomenal job. He's great. He's very effective in basically the Jekyll Hyde of this character. He's quiet and reserved and like shy and all these things in one scene, but then like he's like got this like super aggressiveness to him in another way in another scene, and like the character's very forward and things like that in different scenes.
Right.
So it's not just that character is one thing. The character is painted with this whole giant like rainbow, like this kaleidoscope of different like
Right.
emotions, different things like that, where from one scene to the next, and you've watched this film multiple times, you have to have noticed this on a rewatch, this character, it's kind of a different person from scene to scene almost in some cases. Like,
Yeah, I like the Jekyll and Hyde comparison.
Yeah.
I never thought of that before. I like
his
that.
character transforms, like not transforms literally, but like there's definitely like something different going on with him in like different scenes. To the whole time I just felt uneasy. I didn't know
And
to
it's
what extent. I didn't know what he was doing, what he was planning, what was going to happen necessarily in the film, but like the whole time I'm like, something's going to happen, and like this dude, like there's something going on with him. And then we'll drop like one of the first big spoilers here. Boom, Felix dies after the big party. Felix is dead.
Well, that's not the first. I mean, I
That's
guess I
like
was
the
going to
first
ask you
big,
because you
that's
were
like the
talking
first
about.
big twist, though.
Well,
Right?
what about when he goes to his parents' house, though? Was that a twist for you, or did you kind of expect his parents to be upper middle class and just kind of like living a dream over there? You know what I mean?
No.
Like, because he had said his dad was dead and his mom was, I think, a drug addict. He said a couple times, and
I didn't expect his parents to necessarily be anything. I just like, it was just kind of one of those revelatory, like, oh, I knew this mofo was up to no good. Like, oh, I knew that there was more to meets the eye
Okay.
here. Like, it was just kind of one of those revelatory, like, it was like, it validated my off feeling about him, that there was something definitely going on like beneath the surface with that character that put me
Mhm.
like very ill at ease. It kind of was only just like validation of that. Like, it confirmed that, if that makes sense.
It does. That was it for me. Like when they were on the way to the parents' house in the car ride, which was the day of the party, and Elsbeth, by the way, Rosamund Pike in this movie is fucking like operating on an absolute angelic level. I mean, she is amazing in
She's
this
great.
movie.
Yeah, she's really good.
The best comedic bits come from her. I mean, it's in the trailer, but she has that one thing where she's like, I have an utter and complete horror of ugliness. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like her character, you know? So
Yeah,
she's great. But anyway,
she's really great.
so she throws a party for him. She's kind of feeling a connection, almost like another son for her is Oliver, since he's been at Saltburn. And she's kind of taking him under his wing. So she throws him this big party before the summer ends. And that morning is when Felix takes him to a surprise visit to his mom's house.
Yep.
Because, you know, Felix cares for Oliver and wants him to kind of mend the broken relationship with his mom, not knowing that it was all a lie and that everything's fine with his mom and his dad's alive and they're basically upper middle class in London or whatever, wherever it was, near London.
Yep.
And that was it for me when I was like, well, why did he lie about all of that? Because another thing, Nick, I wanted to ask you is that I feel like there's an underlying commentary here about like kind of like an Eat the Rich type thing, where it's kind of like a satirical interpretation of that type of society that everyone at Saltburn kind of lives. But our main character in that realm is Felix, and he is a nice, sweet, like down to earth dude that doesn't feel like he fits with that kind of detachment of the rest of the folks in Saltburn, right? And I thought Jacob Elordi's performance was just awesome in that respect, because even though he's quote unquote a rich asshole, I mean, you never think that about him, right?
And I would go so far as to extend that not just beyond him, but to the rest of the family as well. I mean, you've got like the eccentric friend
awesome.
or aunt that Carey Mulligan played, who Carey Mulligan was also great in this. Really, really, really
So
great.
good, man.
I mean, she was just
Richard
like
E. Grant, dude.
weird, eccentric. Like, yeah, like Richard E. Grant was just like wealthy, but not like mean or like darkly whatever, but like
Right.
just kind of very, very aloof and like
Yeah.
really whatever. Like you mentioned Rosamund Pike, who was fantastic, Alison Oliver, who was fantastic. How about like my favorite character in the whole movie, and I know it's got to be yours too, it's got to be one of yours anyway, is Duncan. Paul Reese is Duncan the butler.
Oh, the
Who,
butler, yeah.
like literally, like kudos to them for making
He-
that character just constantly look like super creepy. But like
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he doesn't give you that, like, because you almost kind of feel, at least for me, you almost kind of feel that he sees Oliver for what Oliver truly is.
Mhm.
And because he's just a butler, like there's nothing much that he can do about it. But like you could just kind of tell that maybe the butler just kind of is like, y'all really falling for this kid's whole shtick. Like really, you're all
yeah.
going in
I
for all
did
this?
get that. I did get
Yeah.
that sense from him, and I also got the sense that he was kind of on a broader scale, the interpretation of like not wanting outsiders in Saltburn, and he didn't belong there. You know, kind of like that too. I got from him a lot, where he was almost like the human representation of Saltburn. You know, like
I
if
can see
Saltburn,
that.
if
Yeah.
Saltburn were a person, you know what I mean? Okay, let's talk about these three scenes, Nick. So the first one,
God, no.
major spoilers, guys. Also not safe for work. All right. First one, we see Alison Oliver's character, Venetia, the sister of Felix. It's also implied throughout the movie. I don't know if you caught this, but there's a couple different pieces of dialogue that imply there may have been an incestuous relationship with her and Felix that Emerald Fennell kind of threw in the screenplay there. But there's some weird shit going on nonetheless, and she loves Felix very, very much too, that we learned throughout the film. But that's his sister, and she's kind of in the moonlight, out on the lawn in the middle of the night, looking sexy and kind of alluring, and the way it's filmed even adds to that a little bit. And Oliver sees her, goes out to talk to her basically, and to make a long story short, they end up becoming intimate, and he ends up performing oral sex on her in the yard while she is on her period. Did I phrase that correctly?
Just say he got his Red Wings, G. he got his Red Wings. Yes, he went down on her during that time of the month, as it were. She even mentions this to him. And I mean, like I said, like these are like all these different things, like even that, because that's way before you find out about the parents, G. Like even then, you're not just like,
no, that's when I was kind of like, wait a second,
like
because that was detached from his character prior to, for me. Now you're saying you kind of felt something unseedy prior to that, but that was the moment for me where I was like, well, that doesn't match up with the Oliver before this, because everything before this, he was kind of the underdog, and like, Felix had to give him money at the bar to pay for the shots, and you know what I mean? Like he was the studious person at Oxford that was reading all the books over the summer break, and you know what I mean? It didn't match up with the character that had been painted for us prior to that scene. So that scene felt like, in real time as I was watching it, I was kind of like, well, maybe that was one of those like shocking, because I had seen people say like there's shocking stuff in Saltburn, you won't believe it. So I was thinking to myself, well, maybe that's just like one of those shocking scenes that kind of like was meant to stand out, or Oliver's not who we thought he was,
Yeah.
And then, so I think like not even a few minutes after that, there's a scene where Felix, played by Jacob Elordi, is taking a bath. And
Yep.
they kind of share this kind of Jack and Jill bathroom at Saltburn. So
Yeah.
his room is on the other side of it, and it goes through to Felix's room.
Yep.
But anyway, Felix is taking a bath, and we see Oliver kind of watching him bathe, and while he's without Felix knowing it, and while he's watching him bathe, Felix masturbates,
Mm-hmm.
and presumably ends up ejaculating in the bathtub. Which
I mean, I
is a
want to know
callback
what kind
my
of I want to know what kind of like lotion or whatever he was using, because man, he was enjoying that.
He was into that.
I want to know
was
what he
into
had in there. Did he have a fleshlight in there with him or something? I don't know.
that. 2006. I don't know if they were around. Maybe.
Something was happening.
So he, exits the bathroom, and as the bathtub is draining, Oliver gets into the tub and essentially ends up kind of slurping the bath water. And I've seen people say online that they woke up and they're still thinking about the cum slurp in the drain of the tub the day after. It was shot in a way that was very, like kind of sexy, but also very like hard to watch, kind of like it was shot in it was definitely like a cringe moment, but I also kind of felt at that point of the movie, I believed Oliver's desire and attraction to Felix. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like Felix was the object of his affection. He was literally infatuated with the guy. So I felt like it kind of matched up with what I thought he felt for that character.
Yeah, that scene did not surprise me, like, because he's obviously obsessed with Felix. I mean, okay, so here's one knock I'm going to give against the film. Like, we've been talking a lot about like all the different great things about this film, but I gave it a 5. Okay, one of the knocks I'm going to give this film is why the opening montage. Why the opening montage where it replays a whole bunch of the things about his confession that he does at the end of the movie. I don't think it needs it. I really, really don't think it needs it, because again, like, this is one of the reasons why, like, I always had an off feeling about the character, because it kind of establishes it right from that cold open. Like, literally right from that opening, it just kind of has Oliver's character like giving, like, it's like way spoilers for the end of the movie, but like when he gives his confession to Rosamund Pike's character about like everything that he did, like he's sitting there and like giving like was I in love with him, like, oh, I loved him, like all these kind of different things. It's like even how flippant the character was, and like even how kind of schemy, is that a word? I don't know if that's a word, but even like the way that the way that he talked about Felix just in those scenes, I immediately just got an off vibe about Oliver. I never could shake it, like literally the entire movie. And so when I watch a scene like slurping up the masturbatory bathwater, and Fennell, I mean, to Fennell's credit, man, she puts the camera so close on Barry Keoghan's face while he's doing this. She wants you as a viewer to be uncomfortable watching this. She wants you to be uncomfortable with how obsessed Oliver is with Felix, and she also wants to ratchet up that tension, because the way that he's obsessed, like nothing bad's happened in the movie up to this point. You know something's gonna pop off. You know it. You're waiting for it. You're just anticipating it. And I guess my biggest problem with the movie is it kind of just, it plays with that expectation of just like, something's going to happen. I know something's going to happen.
Yeah.
He's obsessed with, he's really obsessed with him. Like the whole time you're like, you got the watch in front of you. You're just like, all right, now he's drinking this bath water. Oh man, this is getting worse. It's really getting obsessed with him. Like he
but for me,
seduces Farley and gets rid of him and everything like that. Like, it's just like,
I get what you're saying, but up until the bathtub scene, I also felt that way, but I felt like it was a organic, like ascension to, or descension, I guess we should say, to what he ultimately ends up doing. But in other words, I thought, and honestly, I still might think this is what happens in the climax, but I think his desire for Felix and not being able to have Felix, which as an extension, not being able to have Saltburn and not being able to have the wealth and the riches and the celebrity and whatever comes with all that stuff, drove him crazy. And I kind of and I'm talking about at this bathtub scene, I'm kind of thinking like, oh, okay, Oliver was that shy kind of bookworm, and he fell in love with this guy, kind of kept it a secret, he's been bottled up inside of him, and he's going to get to a point where he's going to break. He's going to explode. So we'll get to the ending of the movie in a minute, but that's another reason why I didn't like that ending montage, because that took all that away from me as a viewer. Because if it had left it ambiguous, I could be sitting here right now to you and explaining to you, well, yeah, all this shit happened and he did all this because he drove himself mad and he was crazy. But I can't say that because of the spoon feeding that we got with that last montage. Before we get there, though, so the last, or I guess there's really a couple more, but another shocking moment that people have kind of dissected online and stuff is towards the end of the film, and you already mentioned it, when Felix dies, we find out that Oliver basically poisoned him, and that's how he died in a maze in the backyard of Saltburn, which is very reminiscent of The Shining, by the way, which is Fennell has said is one of her favorite movies of all time, so that's not a surprise to me.
Going
nice
back even further than that, like Greek mythology, there's a statue of a minotaur in the clearing that they're in where he dies. Yeah, and he's wearing Felix is even wearing, and I didn't even realize this until right now, but he's wearing angel wings like Icarus. He is. I mean, yeah.
And somewhat similar to like a Romeo and Juliet story too, because that's what Claire Danes is wearing in the Baz Luhrmann adaptation of that. So I saw some of that too, and you can see the influences of like a filmmaker like Luhrmann and a lot of Fennell stuff. But so anyway, we kind of find that out, and the funeral happens. Presumably a couple days later or whatever, and they're putting him to rest. Which, by the way, my favorite scene in this whole movie. I don't mean to get off track here. My favorite scene in this whole movie is the lunch sequence after he dies.
Yeah.
When the family's gathered around and the butler's trying to close the curtains and he can't close them, and Richard E. Grant's fucking flipping out, like, just close the fucking curtains.
Yeah.
And he's fucking pissed. And Venetia's pouring the wine, and she just pours the whole bottle into the glass, and it just spills over. Like, it's a very like exaggerated like picture of grief, but with like a ton of like black comedy built into it.
Yeah.
Because the mom Elizabeth is like, so did you enjoy the party? And it's like literally an hour after they found her son dead, But anyway, I didn't mean to get off track there, but I love that scene in the film. So the funeral happens a couple days later, and to make a long story short, it's pouring down rain. The service ends, and Oliver goes to kind of pay respects to the grave. And he ends up hugging the grave, kind of like laying on top of the freshly dirt.
Uh-huh.
And eventually he takes his pants off and penetrates the gravesite where Felix is buried. And you mentioned the bathwater with Fennell.
He doesn't just penetrate it. He straight up humps the grave.
He gets into it, man.
He gets it on with the grave. Like, literally,
he does, for sure.
I could check off seeing someone hump a freshly dug grave off my bucket list now. That was on there. That was high. So thank you, Emerald Fennell, for that one.
And to Fennell's point, you mentioned this with the bathtub scene and the close-up of his face slurping the bathwater. She does it here, too, because she holds on that shot forever, bro.
Yeah.
Like, it was like 2 minutes.
As an audience member, you're meant to feel really, really uncomfortable by it.
Yeah.
Like, you really, really are. And
but I just felt it was.
It doesn't play off to me though. Like it makes sense to me because that's how obsessed with Felix Oliver was. It makes sense. I'm gonna circle way back because you jumped way ahead and you tried to run away from this whole he descended into madness thing. I completely disagree with that assessment of the film. I think because back when they were at Oxford, like when he first met him and everything like that, he's already telling him the story about the mom and dad being junkies and like all this different stuff. I don't think he descended into madness. I think this character was always this crazy, mad, whatever, like insane, like whatever you want to talk to, like always have this kind of like sociopathic tendencies, whatever you want to say.
But I think the reason you can say
I think it
that
just
is
evolved to
because
that
of
point.
but I think the reason that you can say that firmly is because of the montage scene at the end, which I hated. Like, in other words, if that montage scene didn't exist that showed us all the flashbacks of his preparation and all that stuff, you wouldn't really know. Like, you wouldn't really be able to say, oh, he was off his rocker from the beginning. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, in other words, it would be a lot easier for me to believe or to convince you or anybody else that he started here and descended to here.
Yeah, I don't
But
think.
because
Yep. No, I ain't buying it.
I know you're not buying
I
it,
ain't
but
buying
the
it.
reason you're not buying it is because of the montage, though.
I'm not buying it because of the way Fennell made the movie. Like the character,
I know.
The
I
character
agree
is
with
a liar and a manipulator from the jump, from minute one. Like literally from minute one. The second that Felix casts him
I
out,
don't know, man.
the second that Felix like doesn't call him back to invite him to the bar or whatever, he immediately concocts the story about his dad dying just to get Felix's sympathy. And like immediately gets back into his good graces. Has the Red Wings scene with the sister. Has the serpent slurping up, sucking up the bathwater scene. This is always who this character's been. He didn't descend into anything. This is exactly who he is. Exactly
I
who
know
he was
that.
the whole time.
I know that, but I'm speaking hypothetically. If we didn't know that, you know what I'm saying?
Like I don't get where you're coming at that from then, because like I said, I don't think he descends into anything.
Well, I think because then it would be, but that would be your analysis of the film. But it would be like your opinion, though. Like there wouldn't be an ironclad, like definitive, like
spoiler alert. That's what this whole thing we do is, G.
You know what I mean, though. I mean, I'm just saying, like, let's talk about the end real quick, then, because that's kind of what we're talking about anyway. But the grave humping, all that stuff happens, and I was at a 10 out of 10 up until that point. Like, I had literally loved everything that had happened. We have this like time jump of like 15 years, or I don't know, a long time. To
after
Oliver,
the sister kills herself. Got to throw that in there. After the sister kills herself.
Yeah, we could talk about that actually. Yeah, so you think she killed herself, or you think he did it? You think he just gave her the blade and she did it, right?
That's what we're meant to. That's what it implies.
Yeah,
that's what we're meant to.
That's kind of what I think too. So yeah, there's another bathtub scene where Venetia, with more blood, which is symbolic too, I feel like, but she's kills herself with the blades that Oliver leaves by the tub for her. They have a conversation about how basically neither one of them can have Felix, or will never be able to have Felix. And, that's his sister, but I already mentioned there's kind of some innuendo there, and she obviously feels a strong connection to him one way or another, and she decides to end her life, and she's out of the picture too now. So anyway, so that happens, and that's a pretty pivotal scene as well, especially for that character. But yeah, so we get a time jump of like 15 years. Oliver's in a coffee shop in some town nearby. He seems to be doing pretty well. He's like reading books or whatever, and Elizabeth comes in, Rosamund Pike's character from Saltburn, and recognizes him, and they kind of reconnect. And this is when anything negative for me happened in the movie, because this is when we get that montage, and she coaxes him to go back to Saltburn, which obviously he does, and we get that montage of all the flashbacks of what we had, different things that we had seen in the movie, but how they were orchestrated by Oliver. They weren't chance. They didn't just happen.
Yeah.
Which, that's what I was trying to say to you, is that you may suspect that, but you would not be able to say definitively that he, gave him a flat tire on his bike, or that, what I'm saying? Like, all that shit was kind of shown to us. He had money at the bar, but he acted like he didn't have money so he could be sympathetic or whatever. So all this shit's kind of shown to us, that he's kind of masterminding everything to get to where we get, because he wants to ultimately have Saltburn. So your favorite part, the bookended narration, comes back in too, and Barry Keoghan's character starts kind of narrating everything that he's done and what he's accomplished as a result. And we get a scene of her dying. Elizabeth dies and presumably leaves him the estate. It's empty.
She does leave
Yeah,
him the
he
estate.
does.
There's a whole scene where she signs it over to him.
Yep. And it's empty. The butler's not there. There's no staff there that we see or whatever. And he's dancing, by the way, to Murder on the Dance Floor, which is fucking awesome. Sound drop. Completely naked. Dingy flying around, slapping on the thighs or whatever. He's, doing his thing, dancing.
You will get Keogh Hogg in this movie. Just prepare yourselves.
You'll get the Keoghan Pecker flying around there, and ultimately ends up in like the ballroom, and we see the family stones because, no pun intended, because there's a scene in the movie that explains whenever somebody in the family dies, they write their name on a stone and they throw it in the river. So all the family members that he in one way or another had something to do with their deaths are sitting there on the mantelpiece, and he's dancing, and he has Saltburn, and that's the end of the movie. So I hated the last like 5 minutes of the film, but I loved the first 95% of the movie. So that's kind of where I sit. I mean, did you like the whole like explaining montage thing at the end, or I just hated that. I didn't think we needed it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could take or leave it. I think the film does a good enough job of spelling out, because here's the thing, like before the montage happened, I already assumed all those things happened anyway, because again, like I've had this terrible off feeling about this character this whole time. I'm like, he planned all this, he did all this, and then so it becomes a waiting game in two facets. G, number one, I'm just sitting here, something happened. We get it. He's obsessed with him. He's ingratiating himself with this family. Something happened. Please happen. Okay. Felix finally dies. Something finally happened. But then they don't tell us how. They literally tell us like literally almost nothing about it. Like they ain't no autopsy. Nobody was like, oh, hey, this kid was poisoned from this really, really rich family. And this friend he made at college just like a couple months ago that came to stay with him. Like, all that stuff is weirdly missing from this movie for whatever reason. Probably don't try to do any kind of cognitive heavy lifting on that aspect, because it's only going to ruin and drag the film down for you more a little bit like it did myself. I'm like, why? Nobody did any investigation or anything like that. Just put those razor blades on the edge of the bathtub with his bare hands, and there weren't no fingerprints or nothing like that hanging out up in there or anything like that. Like, I'm just like, well, maybe Duncan came through and polished him up or something like that. I don't necessarily know. Like I said, this is already how I felt about the character anyway. So the montage doesn't really make or break anything for the film for me in that regard. I'm going to tell you what doesn't work for me though, G. Okay. I'm fine with like him killing Felix out of obsession, like this obsessive rage of like, now Felix has discovered that he's not who he says he is. So he's just like, well, now you're never going to want me, and now I can never get you back. So now I'm going to kill you. Like I'm fine with that. And I'm fine with him pretty essentially coaxing the sister, who's pretty much got him figured out, into killing herself. Pretty fine with that as well. James gets rid of him. James buys him off, kicks him out of Saltburn. That's the end of it. Does he have anything really to do with James's death? Do we know that? I don't think we know that for sure.
It didn't mention it, no.
It doesn't mention anything about it. But then, like, where I buy everything else that he does, except for the whole go back to Saltburn and ingratiate himself with Elspeth again, and then I don't know what she's ill with. I guess we're supposed to presume at that point that he's done something to her to put her on some kind of life support, which he then terminates anyway, rips out her breathing tube, which is a pretty grotesque scene in its own right when he does that. It's like, are we meant to like believe that like he's responsible for whatever put her on her deathbed and he's just keeping her alive as a toy or whatever? But like, and this whole thing to assume ownership of Saltburn or whatever, like, you tell me how you feel about this as far as the ending of the film goes. Did you feel at any point leading up to this in the movie that his end game was acquiring Saltburn? Because it came out of absolutely left field for me. I'm just like, what? I'm like, where was
No.
like all this time he left, he took the bribe, all this time he left and just never went back. And then on a whim, when because he orchestrated their meeting in the coffee shop, he didn't just run into her there by chance. Like all of a sudden, like when James dies, he just decides he's going to go back there and take Saltburn.
Yeah, I never thought of him acquiring Saltburn the property as like his end game or whatever.
Yeah.
However, I am okay with the property of Saltburn, the estate, as being symbolic for his desire to achieve riches. You know, like to achieve more in his life. Like obviously, the character of Oliver is not happy with where he is in life, even though he doesn't have a bad life. Like, I mean, he was a great student at Oxford. His family's life seems to be great. Like, but he just wanted to be in that world that, you know, it would be similar today to like people that, you know, are middle class or even were, you know, even lower perhaps. And they like sit around and watch reality TV and like social media TikTok stars and like all these lifestyles that we just know nothing about. And to get in there somehow and to have access, I think that ultimately is the symbolism for what he wanted as a character. I don't think it was necessarily about the property, but I will agree with you that it was a super left field thing at the end. And I mean, I just didn't like the end. I mean, I already told you the last 5 minutes, I just didn't like it all. Like I didn't like the spoon feeding part in the screenplay. I didn't like, cause I mean, to what end? So it's like, okay, now he has Saltburn, you know, he's what, 30 years old and now he has Saltburn, and who's going to pay the property taxes on Saltburn? I mean, what is he doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know what this, like, I wouldn't be able to explain this character in a realistic, like, if I was sitting down if this was something in the news, I wouldn't be able to understand what I was watching on the news. Like, to what end is he, because now he has Saltburn, is like, what now? Everybody that was there or that had anything to do with it is dead because you killed him or had something to do with him dying for the most part. Obviously, your parents have probably ostracized you. You don't have a relationship with them, I wouldn't imagine. So I just don't know. Does he want to live alone forever as a sociopath at Saltburn? Like, I don't know. It's just it's a very weird ending, and I would have loved for it to be left on a bit of a, I don't think cliffhanger is the right word, but a bit of just like mystique and mystery and kind of like we don't really know what's going to happen with him, as opposed to being like, this is what happened with him and he's dancing naked, you know?
It's a strange thing because like on one hand, it's like, do we need the montage of him really kind of explaining like all the different things that he did? Like, it's just things that by that point in the movie, we've assumed that that's what already happened anyway. We know that he killed Felix somehow. We just don't know how necessarily. And all these things. I think a real twist, a real shock to this film would have been if he didn't. I think that would have been the real curveball that this would have hit for me, that I would have been like blown away by. But it kind of played exactly how I expected it to. And then, like I said, it became a waiting game on two fronts. Number one, waiting for something to happen. And then number two, once that something happens, it's like, okay, we know Oliver's behind it. And we know eventually you're going to get to the point in the movie where you're going to reveal it to us. Just can we get there already, please? Like, it just kind of got long in the tooth on both of those fronts for me. And yeah, the whole him acquiring Saltburn thing, like getting ownership of like all of her assets and like Saltburn and everything. Like, I never felt like that was endgame for that character, unless, like, I mean, the argument could also be made that the character doesn't have an end game. Like, it could also be meant, you know, maybe he saw that James died, and well, maybe not even that it's going to continue, but maybe that it wasn't even a plan until he saw in the paper that James had died, and, you know, decided to you know, enact one final bit of whatever. Maybe there's an argument to be made. Maybe he's so hung up on his obsession with Felix after all this time, and he just wanted to be in this place where Felix lived. Like, he wanted to be in Felix's home and be around Felix's things and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can necessarily interpret it. It doesn't work for me really at all. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just I don't think it's paced as well as it could be. I think it's too obvious that Oliver is this conniving, scheming, skeevy character, like with this massive, huge obsession of Felix. And like, the whole film to me just became an exercise in just waiting for him to do something, and then waiting to find out the payoffs from the things that he did. it just like I don't know, like it just didn't intrigue me on any of those fronts. Like I said, that would have been like the master stroke of this movie if we get all the way to the end of the movie and we find out that he didn't kill Felix, because we're definitely meant to assume that he did with how unemotional he is, like toward the family after he dies. Like obviously he has the scene where he humps the grave and he's crying and sobbing because he's distraught and just likes
He'll never have him now. Yeah,
likes getting
sure.
dirt on his hog. But I mean, it's just like, yeah, like that would have been the real swing for me if it would have been like it wasn't him at all, like it was just some terrible accident or something like that. Like who knows, like any number of other things. I think it just became a little bit too obvious and a little bit kind of cliche, I dare say.
Yeah, it definitely wore its, talented Mr. Ripley on its sleeve a little bit there. I just want to give a shout out as we're wrapping up here on Saltburn, guys, to Linus Sandgren, the cinematographer. He works with Damien Chazelle a lot. He did La La Land, First Man, Babylon, No Time to Die, the Bond film. I love the cinematography in this movie. And we already talked about the ratio, and I think that Sandgren may be one of maybe two, if you want to talk about production design or costume design as well, for Oscar nominations, but I don't see a lot of stuff coming Saltburn's way. But I would not be surprised by cinematography and production design. I mean, the film is beautiful. I mean, it's just a really, really extravagant movie that kind of visually tells the story of kind of Saltburn and that kind of upper echelon of the society that these people live in, and I thought it really came across beautifully in the film, along with the performances too. And we already talked about that. I mean, everybody.
The great thing is that
so good, man.
To kind of add one more thing to that as well, Linus Sandgren's cinematography is such that it really does feel like it's also a character in the movie.
It does.
Like it's shot and staged in such a way. Like again, that goes to production design, set design, like all those kinds of things too. But it really does feel like it's its own character in the movie too, which is always a credit to a movie like this. When you have like obviously the movie's called Saltburn, it's very much meant to be a major part of the film, and it really feels like it is. It doesn't feel like you're just at some random old whatever. It definitely feels like it is this it's so strange the way that it's designed too. And they go through all the rooms on like the tour, and you see like all the pictures of all the different people hanging up everywhere and all those kinds of different things. It's odd. It's just odd to me.
I love when Elordi's taking him on the tour when he first gets there, and he's just going to all the rooms and pointing all this stuff out, and he's like, "Oh, and that's where I accidentally fingered my cousin." But we won't talk about that. He keeps going up the stairs. Yeah, it's just a really good one take of him going through Saltburn, kind of introducing him to the different rooms and stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to that. That's our discussion on Saltburn, guys. Anything you want to say to wrap up, Nick? Or are you good?
No, I'm good.
You want to?
I think it's worth seeing. I'm going to say that even with my score for me isn't passing technically, but I'm still going to say it's worth seeing, just because I think it's one of those movies that you're going to form your own opinion about it. You're either really going to love it or it's not going to be for you. And in my case, it just definitely wasn't for me.
And it was for me. So meet me on the lawn at midnight in the moonlight, buddy. We'll continue this conversation.
God help
me. 9 from me and a 5 from Nick puts it at a 7 from the P's, which honestly might be one of the highest ratings I've seen from podcasts. So for 7 out of 10. So for Saltburn. So maybe I win. Yay! I won. So that's our discussion on Saltburn, guys. Nick, I really appreciated it, man, and I'm glad you got out to the theater to check this one out. Now next week, we are doing our first ever kind of mystery review on the P's. Part of that is because we're cool and we want to be, cool for our listeners. The other part is because we have no idea what the fuck we're going to talk about next week.
There it is.
We'll figure it out, though, because Nick is going to an actual mystery screening this week at his
Regal Mystery Movies tomorrow. So,
and I have a couple screeners sitting in my inbox, so we're going to see if they kind of match up. But we're going to try to do something current, and we'll throw it at you next week, and then realistically, we will probably be off the week after that because we realized our recording day falls on Christmas Eve, and I don't think Santa Claus would appreciate me keeping the kids up late, so we probably won't be recording that week. But next week, look for a new review for a new release, as long as we can make it happen. Nick,
question mark.
I enjoyed discussing Saltburn with you, buddy. By the way, I have already written this into the will, and I'm leaving my estate to you. All my assets are yours.
I get the horror guy sign that's hanging behind him because
you get that.
That's the only thing that's written in there.
Yeah, there's not a lot to give you, but it's yours. So whatever you want. You don't have to kill me, okay? It's already being leaved to you. All right, man. I'll see you next week. We'll get in the holiday spirit. We'll talk about something, brother.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. Thank you.